Hi, I'm Myreah Eley,
And I'm Marcus Eley, aka Dashius Clay.
aka Dashius Clay. Anyway, thank you for tuning in to our Behind the Bars segment where we'll be discussing the truth behind bars.
Yep. That's
Not
what we're
prison
doing.
bars, lyrics.
Lyrics.
Anyway, this week's episode, we're going to be discussing the first song of the 16 project called DSS Oppress.
Mm-hmm.
So, you ready to dive in, Dash?
Dive in.
All right, so in the, I'd like to call it poetry, poem,
Spoken
rap.
word. Spoken word. So,
In the spoken word tale, DSS Oppress, the story is pretty much created based on facts that's going on right now in America with DSS pretty much showing favoritism towards one particular demographic over another, particularly African American homes or Latina homes. We have a lot of issues concerning DSS and their rationale when they enter into your home or a case is started. Assumptions are sometimes made that might not have been made if the family was particularly white or of an appearance of wealth or better off financially. So we see a lot of families who are of color and families that are considered poor or below the poverty line who are targeted and harassed and sometimes mistreated by both police enforcement and DSS.
yeah, particularly DSS in this case, but they do kind of work together as they coincide.
Exactly, which is exactly what we're gonna talk about. So let's dive in. So in the tale, let's see here. I just want to make sure I stay on topic because I have a tendency of rambling. At least that's what he says.
You'll see.
This is pretty much a tale of, really it's a sad, unfortunate tale of we started off with a baby who is implied to be white or of Caucasian descent. And pretty much the baby has what appears to be some physical injuries. And it appears that the baby is under distress because the baby is cold and the baby has obviously been lonely or left alone a few times, and the baby's shoulders are broken. So there's some physical injuries, and there's an appearance that the baby is probably sick from just not being properly cared for. And the baby is taken to the ER by its parents, or their parents. I shouldn't say it. The baby, the baby is taken to the ER by their parents, and the people at the ER have no concerns for their the child's mother or the child's father. It's implied that it's strictly based on their skin color. The reason why the doctors or nurses aren't concerned is just because they appear to be upright citizens. Which, how does one appear to be upright, especially concerning race? How would one appear to be upright just because of how their skin looks?
Right.
But that's what's implied in the tale. And so after they go to the ER, pretty much nothing happens to the mother and father. They're not questioned about anything. They have no opposer, which is what is said in spoken word. I will quote it. We're missing the detail, but it says the ER has no concerns for mother, the father, perfect citizen, no opposer. So no one's really looking into them at all. But then you have the brother man, which is obviously implied to be the black man. And he's clearly elderly. or at the very least, he's a grandparent because he left his grandsons at home alone in order to go to the doctor's office because he's having some health issues that is causing him to be deaf and ultimately mute. So he can't speak and he can't hear. And so he leaves his 15 and 16-year-old grandsons home alone to go to the doctor, at which point the grandsons, unfortunately, they fell asleep. And they fell asleep without realizing that the stove was left on. And it's and although it's not said in the tale, in the spoken word, it's obvious that the house must have caught fire and ultimately killed the grandsons in it. And so, leading straight from the baby, leaving the ER without their parents being questioned, we go straight into the grandfather, the African American grandfather, who is in handcuffs. So he's about to be arrested for child endangerment, even though it is completely legal to leave a 15 and a 16-year-old home.
Yep.
And he is mute, like I said, and he's deaf. And so he can't even really defend himself or speak. And he's clearly suffering enough because not only can he not speak or hear, but he just lost his grandsons in a fire. And now here the cops are pretty much kind of harassing him. And the thing is, they realize that they are overboard. They realize that they're probably harassing this man, but at the same time, they don't even realize the extent of, because they have no idea that the man is deaf or that he can't hear, because it says in the tale that the cops won't know that until the next day. They won't even know that the man could not hear and that he could not speak until the next day. But they were pretty much nitpicking, I'll say, nitpicking with him. And so during the tale, pretty much the officer is talking a lot of trash and, you know, calling him a nigger and just being real belligerent with him. At which point the man, he's probably most definitely scared out of his life because he cannot speak to these officers, and he probably doesn't have anyone else, because that's what's implied in the tale. He doesn't have anyone else because he specifically is thinking that his neighbor Lou comes to check on the boys while he's gone. That's what it clearly says. And the other thing is, if he is deaf and he is elderly, then you can probably kind of say that the grandsons and him, they were kind of all taking care of each other. Now, 15 and 16 years old, especially 15 and 16-year-old young men, they are definitely old enough to kind of be responsible for themselves.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are some things that they still need adult supervision overall, but generally high schoolers, particularly juniors and seniors, are pretty self-sufficient. Most definitely more self-sufficient than that baby who was taken to the ER with all of those health issues, but her parents were not even questioned. And so that's obviously a lot of, that alone, it shows a lot of division, a lot of favoritism, a lot of prejudice in that. So anyway, he's suffering enough. He's lost his grandsons. He's completely on his own because it tells us that all he has is Lou. Because if he had other people, why then is no one else there for him when he's getting arrested? His grandsons are gone. And so he's in handcuffs. Where is his family? Where is his friends? So it's implied that he is alone, which is probably another reason why he's being targeted. Elderly, black, alone. Yeah. And so, anyway, right after that, we pretty much just jump right after the harassment. He's ultimately killed, and that is, I guess, kind of a little bit of light, glass half full kind of thing. Right at the end of the tale, they imply that well, I imply it's mine. I imply that it's pretty much not a happy ending, but a middle ground ending. Because he's a saved man
Right.
in Christ. And
Right.
so when he gets shot, he gets to be with his grandsons and the Lord again.
Right.
At the end of the tale. So that's still kind of, I guess, like a happy-ish ending. Obviously, we're still going to be upset because he has died and his grandsons have died. But
Right.
They all get to be together again in the end.
Right.
So make sure I touched everything.
You did.
So what I will say is him being targeted from being elderly to black men, he pretty much got killed for committing 3 out of the 4 biggest crimes in America.
What are those things?
I'm happy you asked, Dash. Those 4, I'm going to say the 4, but I'm going to say the 3 that he committed. And that is 1, being a black man in America. 2, being poor. And 3, being elderly. I feel like those are the bigger crimes in America.
The other 4.
I'm going to get to it. I'm just saying.
Okay.
The 4th one is being a woman in America, and obviously he's not a woman. And the reason why I specifically said a woman and not a black woman is because I think in America, women, period, just deal with a bunch of junk.
Well, you guys witnessed the rambling. But aside from those 4 crimes, because I don't want to use this story to make a complete generalization because there's so many different scenarios.
Right. There are cases where DSS does
so many
right.
different scenarios. Well, I'm not even referring to when they do right, but where wrong happens. This, because it doesn't even have to be, a death involved or anything, anybody to point a finger at or anything for things to go wrong as far as that goes. The running stories that, there are a lot of households who probably could use DSS to bring stuff together to make it better for the children.
Mm-hmm.
But, the homes that get the most grief are the homes where things are in order. It's kind of like, the oxymoron of, a father who's there for his children being put on child support when the deadbeat runs free and gets to do nothing. It's like, can't win for losing. You can do everything right in the household.
Yeah.
Nobody does everything right, but the household can be beneficial for the children more than it's not. And still, you reap consequences.
There are just obviously cases where people with better financial circumstances are overlooked or ignored, while loving and caring homes are pretty much targeted and nitpicked and separated and broken apart, more so just because of the fact that they are of a certain skin color and they lack, I guess I'm not going to say lack, because they might be okay financially, just not as well off as another.
I.e., can't really defend themselves.
Exactly. Because obviously somebody with more finances would definitely probably fight a little bit harder, especially in court and with a good lawyer.
Because they have the means to do so.
Yes, but obviously families that don't kind of have to roll over even, and they take advantage of that. They take advantage of that.
Because if that man in this story would have lived and was able to go to court, they would have appointed him a court-appointed lawyer, and that lawyer would have just told him to take a plea. when he didn't do anything wrong. I mean, let's look at. I said this earlier. It's a joke that Dave Chappelle made about what is a 15-year-old really. You know, so leaving children, teenagers, 15 and 16 at home. You know, no one in their mind says, okay, if I leave these two at home, they're gonna burn the house down. And that's tragic, but we can't take that one scenario because, you know, they like to do that. They take that one scenario and make it the rubric for all other scenarios. You know, that was tragic in this story, but let's be completely honest. It's not every day you just hear about 15 and 16-year-olds burning down houses. Mm-hmm. At least not any ones that are mentally stable. So,
right.
So if a 16-year-old is able to be tried as an adult in a criminal case, then I don't see why it's wrong to leave a 16-year-old at home alone if he's able to be tried and sent to prison as an adult. Because if you look at him as an adult in this light, has to be seen as an adult in this light. You can't really play both sides of the field.
Double standard.
You know, and although double standards exist, you know, we know this. It has to be understood why each one shouldn't.
Yeah.
Because some double standards make sense. We can't say that they don't. I'm not gonna say that, but that doesn't make sense for a 16-year-old to be tried as an adult, but it's endangerment to leave him at home alone. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah. Yeah, and the thing is, touching on what you just said about court and the court appointed attorney. The other thing is he can't even hear or speak. So how can he properly even defend himself? And even though by law they're all required, if someone needs some type of accessibility assistance, they are required to do so. Based on the rationale that they have and how they have approached this entire case, do you really think they were going to play fair and really fulfill that accessibility law?
No. Now, let me classify this by saying this is in no way, form, or fashion me saying or us saying that every court-appointed attorney is a part of the man's system to throw people under the bus. But let's just be honest. You know, if a lawyer just tells you to take a plea without assessing the situation fully, that lets me know that he doesn't really care about what happens to you. He cares about his caseload. He cares about getting his caseload off, and the effort is put based on what credibility he gets afterwards or what work he has to do afterwards. Now, if it's a lawyer and a court-appointed lawyer, let's be honest, is a court-appointed lawyer really thinking about credibility or their track record as far as how many wins they have? They're a court-appointed lawyer because some are, but I feel, I'm going to put I feel in front of it because I don't like to speak opinions as facts, but I feel court-appointed, attorneys, they are that for a reason. They are that for a reason, because you hear when you're in court, I'm pretty sure everyone hasn't been fortunate enough to be in court. but
lucky you.
Lucky you. But when you're in there, you hear them call each person that's on the docket, and they say, okay, are you gonna, do you have an attorney or are you gonna represent yourself? And then you have those that are called who have attorneys already, and they call the attorney and they're firm. I say firm to say that these lawyers have a firm or a part of a firm. They don't necessarily own the firm. They may be a partner, they may not be partner, but they are a part of that firm. These court-appointed attorneys don't have firms. They're just put in a position to be paid by the government to handle a caseload. That's it. They're paid whether they win or lose. So the amount of care they're putting into the case just isn't going to be the same as someone who has a reputation running on you. Because if you have a reputation and you want clients and your reputation isn't what it needs to be, then those clients are going to shy away from putting you as their lawyer or choosing you as their lawyer. So those court-appointed attorneys, they're just, you know, they're just a face. And in their caseload, you're just a face.
And honestly, I think some of them really do want to do a good job and they really want to get things done. But sometimes it could even still just be a scenario where they just can't. How can you say with 100% of your mind that I did everything that I could when your desk is piled up with several cases? And not to mention the fact that you're going to be in court for this case today, and you're going to be in court for the next case tomorrow, and you're just steadily back and forth in court for all these different cases. How can you not get mixed up in that? Even if it's a matter of it not necessarily being their fault, but their clients and themselves still end up suffering from it anyway. So either way you want to look at it, if you're somebody who cannot afford an attorney, then there's always just at least some type of possibility that you're not properly in good hands.
Yeah.
Or properly being represented.
And I've seen more times than not that was the case with court-appointed attorneys, unfortunately.
Unfortunately.
And you know, the career of law, just the basis of it is dishonest anyway. Is dishonest anyway, but that's a whole nother discussion. So we won't get into it.
Yeah, maybe that'll be in another song. It probably is. It's in a song.
It's definitely in a song. I don't know anything that's not in a song. You know?
Right. Yeah, like we have a song about fried chicken. We don't, but
we do not
know a song about fried chicken.
Yes, we've heard. I don't know it. I don't know it. We've heard it though. No, I didn't know it. It's two of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, one's by Nas and Busta Rhymes.
Okay, so another thing that I do want to touch before we get too far off, because this is definitely called DSS Oppress, so it's not even necessarily focusing on police officers or attorneys or court-appointed attorneys. However, the DSS did definitely include police officers in this tale. And the thing is, if you listen to the words of the spoken word poetry, it clearly says that they brought, well, I'll read it. It says, DSS, you're in the wrong home. But since you brought the cops in and they're ready to play, you think brother man ain't going to refuse to pay. And then it goes on to talk about black pride. And then it says, and since this brother ain't got nothing to lose, I'm placing all my bets on him to refuse. And I want to touch can I talk? I want to touch specifically on those parts or particular bars, because what it's indicating is that they brought the cops in to handle their dirty work. Because the thing with DSS that a lot of Americans, a lot of people who are being targeted don't realize is that by law, it is a lot of things that DSS can't do. And that's why they involve the police, because they cannot do it. And you have DSS workers, when there's a call being made, you have DSS workers that will tell you that you have to let them in. You have to talk to them. But that's not necessarily true. And a lot of times when you're letting them in, you're actually opening your door for them to come in and speculate the negative. Because a lot of them will jump straight into it. I mean, so minute to the point that if you have a bunch of cereal boxes on your refrigerator, they're going to say, oh, you must not be feeding the kids because you got a lot of cereal left. I've actually heard that particular slur being made before.
Sounds absolutely stupid.
It's absolutely ridiculous, but that's my point. So,
black people like cereal.
Not to mention the fact that in a sense it means that I am feeding somebody. I mean, I got a lot of food in here. That means I got food. At the very least, you know that I'm not so poor to the point that I don't have enough food for my kids. Because clearly, if I have those boxes on my fridge, then obviously I do have enough food for my kids.
Yep, absolutely.
So, you know, there's a lot of ways to look at that scenario. But the thing is, this is the kind of justifications that are being made. And so DSS brings the cops in on this. You know, they act like they really want justice for a 15 and 16-year-old son who just unfortunately did die in a house fire, But they bring in the cops, and the part about, you know, you think the brother man ain't gonna refuse to pay, it's pretty much saying a lot of times when we hear about scenarios like this or we see it on TV, a lot of particularly African Americans or the ones that are being targeted, when they're listening to stories like this, there is a little bit of anger or frustration or disdain. And so a lot of times we're thinking, yeah, don't give that officer what he wants.
Right.
Or yeah, he's disrespecting you. He's coming in incorrectly.
Right.
So you return that favor, or you just be insubordinate. And that's how a lot of people think, which is also unfortunate because I'm not condoning that. Although the words are in here, that's just to pretty much touch on some of the thoughts that have come due to the anger that a lot of us have for what's going on with our people and us being targeted.
Yeah, and you know, for the record, all police are not bad police.
Exactly.
So, you know, be aware of that.
Yeah.
And so don't go out here and just, you know, feel like you have to be a certain way to someone just because they're a police officer. You know, allow them to do their job, but you do have to figure out if they're doing their job properly or not. Unfortunately, we have to police the police.
Yeah. And the thing is, if they're being disrespectful, it doesn't mean that you then return that favor. I mean, what exactly do you gain from that?
Yeah.
I mean,
you know, you further put yourself in danger.
Exactly.
Don't be stupid.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to go home to their children. Everybody wants to go home to their wives. People who have wives.
Yeah.
You know, some people want to go home to this house. I don't know. But,
oh, God.
but, you know, everybody wants to go home and be able to go to sleep and wake up the next day and repeat.
Yes. Don't feel like, you know, you have to be prideful. You have to stand up to them in that way. I feel, and this is what I feel, but I feel like there are a lot of ways to stand up to the police that doesn't involve you being confrontational with them directly. Success, education, knowledge, all of these things and more are definitely ways to counter what the evil police officers or the evil part of the government is trying to do to us. And I want to specify evil part because, again, I do not associate this narrative with every single police officer and every single government official.
You can.
And you can't stress that enough, because what you don't want to be is just like them.
Right. You don't. And on top of that, you don't want to play into the stereotype that they're trying to put forward on you anyway.
Yeah.
Because just like it says, you know, the police officer, they went in there trying to play off of the angry black man stereotype. You know, they went in there and said, "Oh, he's gonna refuse." You know, he's refusing. You don't have to refuse to you know, stand up. You don't. You know, you don't have to. You can do everything they say and still make a point.
Yeah.
I think doing everything they say kind of making a point.
Yeah, and the thing is, they did not. It's clear that they did not assess the issue properly. We don't know exactly what went wrong with their assessment, but it's clear that they did not assess the issue properly because they
went wrong with this point.
Well, the thing is, they don't even realize that the man cannot hear them and cannot speak. So the guy actually thinks that he's being insubordinate, like, you know, and he's talking junk to him, like, you don't have nothing to say to me, nigger, you know. And so he doesn't even really realize that the guy just actually can't speak, and he's like still, and quiet and scared for his life, really, and no one's there to speak for him. And the other thing is, did they Mirandize the man? Because as far as I know, a full report of being Mirandized would be not just saying those Miranda rights, but also asking, do you understand these Miranda rights? But if the man can't hear him and can't speak, how can he consent or make it clear that he understood his Miranda rights? So we have that also.
Yeah.
Where was the law? Where was any of the law? But, you know, they feel like he's being insubordinate and they feel like he's resisting arrest, which is a big thing, because the big thing with resistance is that you have officers who will do just about anything to justify their actions. And the reason why I say that particularly is because I have seen just flat out handcuffs, lying on your stomach, face shoved into the grass. They got their knee in a black man's back.
No more stories.
They're yelling, "Stop resisting!
No more
Stop
stories.
resisting!" But how in the world
I'm cuffed.
am I resisting when my hands are cuffed? I'm lying on my stomach. My face is in the grass. How am I resisting?
No, I could be right.
And your knee is in my back.
I could be right. I didn't say I could be wrong. I could be right, and I am right, that this blind man, unarmed, I'm pretty sure, did not pose a direct threat to two armed officers. Two officers?
Deaf,
How many officers were there?
deaf man. It's
really
not
say.
really made clear.
But it was more than one.
Yeah, it's clear.
More than one. And so that disputes the reasoning where they all say we're scared for our life. We were scared for our life.
He's elderly.
We were scared for our life. Now, because if they would have went about it the way that it's supposed to be done properly, they could have taken them in for interrogation, where they would have clearly found out he don't know what you're saying.
Right, and he would have had to have a lawyer present as well.
And so that it's too many stories where a black man who wasn't able to do anything, hadn't committed a crime, or at least, not one that was violent and was killed.
Yep.
Where then there are scenarios where there have been mass murderers who were arrested peacefully.
Just walked right on out of there. It's like walking up to a criminal. Hey, how you doing? Can I handcuff you today?
Just in the last 3 years, it's been more than one scenario where a mass murderer who just so happened to be white was peacefully arrested. I can say two, and I'm gonna name names. Dylan Roof. I was in Charleston, South Carolina, the day after that happened, and if you're not familiar with that, Dylan Roof was a white guy who went into a church that was having a Bible study and opened fire and killed 9 people, nine black people. He was arrested peacefully. Now let's take it even closer to home, where we lived in South Carolina, Florence, South Carolina, where police officers were responding to, some I believe it was a child molestation case. It was a guy whose son was
his son.
The guy's son was,
he was raping people.
He was
molesting.
He was molesting a 10-year-old, and someone called the police on the son. The father knew the police were coming. The father killed 3 police.
Yep, he opened fire as soon as he saw the cops coming.
Killed 3
and
police.
This was in like a really good neighborhood. It was pretty much wealthy people, or people.
Killed 3 people.
Higher middle
killed
class.
3 officers who just so happened to all be black. I don't know if that's a coincidence or not.
All the officers that got killed were black, right?
He was arrested peacefully.
Yeah, and he's opening fire. And the crazy thing is, him and his wife were lawyers. His wife was a divorce attorney, and he was.
I bet you know what her next case was.
She is divorcing him, by the way. And by the way, in court, he actually blamed his stuff, he tried to kind of claim mental illness.
I don't know if I know anybody mentally impaired with that kind of aim.
Yeah. I
Not
guess
saying that it can't happen. I just don't know anybody. I don't know.
Yeah. So the point is, officers definitely justify their rash or bad decisions on factors that are unrelatable.
And it's wrong for DSS. I'm not gonna say it's wrong for them to involve them if the intention is pure and things go left, that's one thing. But if you're purposely involving police to make them enforce something that you're not able to.
And why would you even need the officers if you've actually found something done wrong?
Mm-hmm.
You found something done wrong, you can take it to your superior, and at that point, y'all can EPC the kids by going in front of a judge and saying, hey, this is the evidence I found, you need to remove these kids right away. They don't want to go through that route. And they really want the cops to come in and stir stuff up. And the cops make you feel like, when these cops come in, they make you feel like you have to do everything they say. And that is not true. And they threaten you. They say they're going to arrest you. They'll tell you that they're going to EPC your kids, put them in foster care, pretty much.
Spread them out. First of all, that alone, for an officer to make the threat that I'm gonna EPC your children and you'll never be able to find them, that's crazy to say as a person, as a human being.
As a human being. And the crazy thing is, if you're threatening me those things, then that means that you know I care about my kids.
Right.
Because if I didn't care about my kids, why would that threat even bother me?
Because you to say something like that, that's a reflection of you and not me.
But if you're going to take my kids and I don't care about them, I'm not taking care of them, and I could care less about them,
that threat means nothing.
Like, okay, take them.
That threat means nothing.
But obviously you know that is a soft spot for me, which means that you know that taking these kids out of the home may not necessarily be the proper solution to whatever issue there might be, if there's an issue going on at home at all.
And then on the same topic, but on another note of it, I wonder what the screening process is for where these children get EPC too.
Yep.
Because they're not the healthiest places. Children are better off in some home. Some children are better off in the home that they were taken away from, because you have these foster homes, group homes, where a bunch of bad kids who people didn't know what to do with, and who just so happen to have bad parents too, are here and just having a whole bunch of pent up frustration. And then you have a child whose parents who fell into an unfortunate situation where someone who didn't like them or something. Because really all they really have to do is call DSS and say, oh, they're mistreating their kids. It doesn't really have to be an investigation. They're coming. All they need is word of mouth. And they'll just come in with the negative notion already, and then come in and say, like you said, when you let them in, you give them the opportunity to make every negative claim they can find. Because
a lot of them aren't objective. Now, I've met some DSS workers who were, and they come in and they're not closer on a negative or positive side. They coming in objectively to observe the situation. And when they see, okay, there's nothing wrong here, somebody just pissed off, and so they filed a false report. Things like that happen, which is very messed up, by the way.
Right.
But
it is.
But the way you come in makes a bit of a difference. If you cannot be objective, then you should not be in charge of making a decision that would affect children and their family and the world that exists around them as they know.
Right, because even if a child leaves the home and goes to another place that's not great, and they, however long, make it back home to their actual parents, you don't know what that time away did to those children. You don't know what effect that has. You don't know if they have a problem locating who they feel their parents' identity belongs to. You know, because there's children being kidnapped for their whole life, and then they recognize the kidnapper as their parent. So you don't know what type of trauma because trauma always starts in childhood, and unless it's handled, it's always almost 100% of the time going to carry on into adulthood.
Another interesting thing, particularly back into some of the lyrics of the spoken word, when DSS does bring the cops in, it leaves room in here for speculation and to get your own narrative. Mm-hmm. But I think it's kind of, I'm not going to say it's clear, but it makes you wonder if DSS knew that the man was deaf and just didn't relay that to police officers. Because if you think about it, if he's elderly and he has all these health issues, he's probably getting some type of government assistance. And I'm pretty sure they have a file on him in the social services office, the Department of Social Services.
Because if you think it's a crime for a 15, 16-year-old to be left home, then you should feel uneasy about them living alone with the deaf and mute man, because he can't communicate to the children like he should be able to, and they're 15 and 16. They're teenagers. They're able to take care of themselves, but they're still young. And there still may be a lack of focus as far as learning what they need to learn to take care of him, because he needs more taken care of than them. Yeah. I feel.
Which means that the system isn't really properly caring for the elderly man anyway.
Because,
that's probably why he needs his grandsons there. They were helping each other.
Right, because he has to go out in society every day knowing that nobody's going to completely understand him.
Yeah. And so, DSS, out of anger or resentment or just pure hatred, may not have disclosed that information to officers to make the situation escalated even more. Because if the DSS worker indeed did know, and he's watching the officers harass this man, he's watching the officers talk to this man and the man not say anything, the DSS worker may have known that this guy can't speak and this guy can't hear, and obviously didn't step in, didn't do anything about it. And so it's clear that they were targeting him and trying to get the officers to do their dirty work. And another thing I want to say is the cops may or may not have come in hot based on their own assumptions.
Yep.
They may have come in hot because the DSS worker gave it to them that way. Yep. So we don't know what the worker said to involve the cops. Because if you're a good cop and a DSS worker calls you and says, hey, there's some deaf man who can't talk, who may be a offender for child endangerment, I need you to come arrest this man. Why would the cops come in hot on something like that?
Yeah, because, this type of story, it leaves room for a whole lot of speculation. Because, whenever anyone dies, this isn't just children or younger people. Mm-hmm. They want to find out who's this person next of kin.
Right. No one called his people.
So
nothing.
On top of that, let's just be honest, every person on earth has a file. Mm-hmm. What's in that file, we don't know, but they have a file. And so
some people's files are sealed, probably for working with the police. It's crazy because the police actually now will bring on criminals to take down other criminals, and that's how that criminal gets off. So it's not really about justice or punishing somebody for doing a crime. It's about how...
What can you do for me?
Exactly. How can you help me, the police? The police should be helping us.
And I was saying what I said to say. So they had to find out who these boys next to kin was, because it's supposed to be to let this person know that this tragedy has happened. Yeah. But it seemed like in this case, they found out this person, they're next to kin, to make them a suspect.
And when you're in this, I'm sorry.
To make them a suspect, and I didn't want to know, for one, how long has this man been deaf and mute? He didn't just get deaf and mute yesterday. before this happened.
Right.
This wasn't his first visit to a doctor. It couldn't have been his first visit to a doctor. If it is, that's a little nuts.
Right.
And if he has a visit to a doctor, that means deaf mute is in his file. Wherever it is, that's in it. There's no person who goes to a hospital and gets diagnosed with anything and it's not recorded.
All subject to officers not doing a proper investigation. Assumptions, allegations, accusations.
And DSS
Immediately.
should have had this information before the police even had a chance to come around.
Yeah. And as a social worker, I know obviously your job entails that you obviously do protect children, but you have a responsibility to protect the elderly as well.
Yeah.
Or people, period. You know, you should be basing your assessment on the best reality, the best scenario, and not just whatever flies out. There's no real structure.
And an officer's job is to protect the served, not protect the served who we think is not guilty. Because even people who have committed crimes and people who are in prison for however long they've been there are to be protected.
Right.
For sure.
Exactly. And, you know, so with all that being said, and with the fact that, like we just clearly stated, that DSS might have known about this and not disclosed this information to the officers, the point is, everything that happened with the elderly man not being able to speak, not really being able to understand what they're telling him or saying to him, you know, ultimately led to him being shot, killed in cold blood. And
really
by
sucks.
the officer, right, and by the officers reacting the way that they did, you know, they can justify their actions by saying, "Oh well, you know, he wasn't speaking to us.
That's not a reason to shoot
us."
somebody. First of all,
It
wasn't posing an immediate threat. Because he's not talking to us. Okay, arrest him.
Right.
Arrest him.
Right. And so that alone is very, very disturbing. Which is why, you know, like I said, it's kind of a glass half empty, half full ending, because even though he was killed in cold blood, he was murdered, really.
That's murder.
He did end up in heaven, which was kind of like a happy...
Right, happy ending for him.
For him, but it's just sad in America.
But his happy ending was in a spiritual sense.
Right.
His ending in a natural sense was horrible.
Yeah, and he's living happily ever after, especially now that he's away from America. He's away from this oppressed world that is woke.
And he can hear him talk again.
That is true too.
Because I would show be up there saying, you know what? I was trying to tell them I couldn't hear, but they weren't listening.
And so, I think that was pretty much everything I wanted to touch. The officers obviously wanted the guy to kiss their hind parts. Why, I don't know. You know, what I do want to discuss is like an ironic or pretty much fun fact about this. It's not really fun, more so ironic in this particular case, in this particular spoken word. But, you know, what's ironic is you can notice there are two victims. I don't want to call the grandsons victims. They were victims of an unfortunate situation, but they weren't the main focus here. So I want to talk about two victims in particular in the story, which was the baby girl from earlier. We can't forget about her, and the elderly man. The thing is, they both had extreme limitations because she was deaf. She was blind, and he was deaf. And so both being fragile and unable to care for themselves, even if they weren't a baby, or if they weren't elderly, even if one was older and one was younger, either way, she was blind.
Neglected as well.
And either way, she's blind and he's deaf. So he can't speak. So you know, there's still some pretty extreme things in there.
She was neglected as well.
Right. And obviously nothing happened to her parents. But the irony in all of this is that they had physical limitations or physical illnesses. However, in the tail, DSS and the officers, they're mentally ill. I would consider this issue in America mental illness. And the reason why I say that is their mentalities are struck with a deaf ear and blind eyes. They are truly the ones that we should feel sorry for, because they're truly the ones who cannot hear, and they cannot see their own evil, their schemes, their own crimes. And worst of all, out of this whole thing is you cannot fix anything that you cannot see. The baby went to the ER. The elderly man went to the doctor. They're trying to fix their physical limitations. Meanwhile, DSS and certain officers are not trying to fix anything. They don't even feel like they have a problem. But to me, their hatred for us and their targeting and their nitpicking, that's a mental illness to me.
Yeah.
They were the victims were physically ill, but these particular people enforcing this oppression, they're mentally ill. And the other irony is that America is truly blind to the official enemy, the real enemy.
At least one part of a few parts of America.
Right, and this is why it's important to not treat every officer the same, or every white person the same, or every black person the same, or
treat every person the same.
And that is the right way, no matter what they do to you, because the real enemy is the devil. If you want to get technical.
Treat every person the same.
Now, officers and government may be fulfilling the devil's will, but the true enemy is definitely the devil. So, I just thought that was an ironic fact. Kind of funny how that works out and how that's all played into something as small as 32 bars can pretty much have this much depth and this much of a story compelled on a person's heart to just pretty much hear the basics, which is a white baby is taken to the ER with some serious injuries and their parents aren't questioned, versus an elderly man who is suffering physically and has just lost his grandsons, but is about to get arrested for child endangerment, all because he left his teenage boys home alone, and it just so happened to lead into a house fire that ultimately led to their death.
15 and 16.
And so this particular spoken word called DSS Oppress was from, it was the first song or rap or whatever you want to call it. It was the first form of art. It was the first artistry in the 16th project. And that's something that's very important. The 16th project is important because all of this depth right here, if spoken outside of artistry, you never really know how it's going to come off, who's going to perceive it or receive it a certain way. And so being able to utilize your talent, your God-given talent, your artistry, being able to speak those emotions with art is one of the best forms of movements and getting change into the world, I think.
Yep. Everybody speaks through their gift. At least most of the time when people speak honestly, it's from a gift.
Right.
From...
Because that's where your heart is.
A gift could be whatever, it could be the gift of talking. Could be the gift of dance. Could be the gift of basketball. I've seen, this guy on YouTube who uses his basketball to, put forth ministry. Mm-hmm. It's able to be done. He goes and plays basketball with prisoners, and it helps them because they don't really get anything there. Mm-hmm. He's famous, but Professor Live, that's his page, I think. I'm not sure, but yeah. So use your gift. Use your gift, because that is your platform. That is what God has given you to speak truth and enlighten people who don't know, who just like that's why we have this segment, because
a lot of times when we hear music, we kind of just go on a strength of the beat, and it just sounds good. But you really need to dive into the depths of what the music is saying, because we literally just talked an hour about 32 bars, and that tells you how deep music can be, how deep art is. That's why when you go see a painting, people who are actually into that stuff, they're seeing this whole vision, and you're looking at it like it's just a triangle, you know, because you have to really dive deep. You just have to dive deep into this artistry.
But if you want to know more about it, about the 16 project, go to the site.
Go to our
What's
website.
the website?
Eley Enforcement Entertainment .life. That's ELEY ENFORCEMENT, and then the abbreviation for entertainment, which is ENT .life.
I
think check it out.
I think they knew the abbreviation for entertainment was ENT. She can spell it and ramble, y'all. But that will conclude this segment of Behind the Bars.
It will. So definitely stay tuned for next week's segment where we will be discussing
me. But I'll let y'all figure out what that topic is when the next segment comes out. So until then, be blessed. If you're not speaking with your heart, don't speak at all.
All right. And follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, Eley Enforcement Entertainment. Bye-bye.
Deuces to the sky.
Stay blessed.